thank you for attending our session. We have free t-shirts if you want one after the session. So please help yourself to a t-shirt. We have larges, extra larges, and 2XLs. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Just a few reminders to keep in mind. This session is being recorded and streamed, so please stay masked while indoors and not actively eating or drinking. Seats in the back of the room are set with some extra room for those that would like additional space. And please keep the aisles and any marked accessibility spaces open and clear for folks that need them. So thank you for coming to our personal storytelling session. My name is Laura Packard. I'm Executive Director of Healthcare Voter, and I'm also on the board of Unrig Our Economy. And I'm going to be sharing my personal healthcare story and the healthcare activism that it led me to. Alicia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alicia Johnson. I worked for Amazon for 6 months, and I'm from New York.
Good afternoon. I'm Matt Cusick. I also worked at Amazon in Staten Island for about 7 or 8 months and was organizing with the Amazon Labor Union. I am now an Amazon organizer at large with other organizers throughout the country.
Hi, my name is Melissa Byrne, and I do a lot of work on canceling student loan debt. So if anybody here has student loan debt, we're working really hard to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So that's us. And now we're going to be sharing our stories more in depth and hopefully with lessons that you can learn in your own activism. Matt.
So when I heard the title for this panel, The Power of Personal Storytelling, what came to my mind initially was not telling my story, but the work of an organizer in large part is getting other people to tell their stories. So when you start talking to people about unionizing, I mean, obviously you have to explain to people a lot of times like why a union is good. What is a union? What does it do? And how do we get one? And all of those sorts of things. But my story isn't particularly compelling to get the case that we need a union at Amazon, partly because I joined Amazon to form the union. I didn't have a long history of experience at Amazon when I started doing the organizing. I knew from the outside a lot of bad things about the way the company was run, and I wanted to change those things. And so I could speak to that part, but the whole rest of the movement, building the movement, involved a lot of getting other people to speak to their experiences, which does a lot of things, and there is a lot of power in that in a lot of different ways. One of the ways in which that is powerful is a lot of people never get to speak and feel like they're being heard about workplace issues, especially at Amazon. So just opening up a space where we were listening to people and really actively listening, asking them questions about what problems they had, and brainstorming about how we could solve those problems and talking that sort of stuff through was pretty radical at a place like Amazon. Amazon has some very superficial, very artificial means of what they call direct employer-to-employee communication. One of the major ones is a thing called the Voice of the Associates Board, VOA board. But most Amazon workers understand that if you complain on that, any of the big issues that Amazon has, they're going to be ignored. You're going to get a canned corporate response because none of those big issues are going to change because they're known, they're well known, they're well reported. Everybody in the headquarters knows about these problems. They don't change them because they have a business incentive not to change them. And so people complain, nothing happens, and so that is not a real form of communication. Now, I can't necessarily just listening to somebody's problems fix their problems, obviously. But I can say I am committed to fixing their problems. That's why I'm there at all. And that I'm interested in hearing about their problems. And that, that opens up a space for people. People can speak to their issues. And that's a sort of a power that people otherwise might have felt disempowered about. And so that's maybe like baby step one in the building the movement, activating people, is first just getting them to speak to the issues that are affecting them. And when they do that, one of the things that happens is people have a lot of the same issues, and they don't necessarily know that until they start speaking about them. And they realize, oh, yeah, this thing that seemed very particular, and very confusing, and very absurd, and Kafkaesque, and just horrible at Amazon. Oh, well, this is a widespread problem, and it's not just me that this is happening to. It's happening to all of my coworkers. And so it's not just about fixing this for myself. I need to fix this for other people. And so that's part of the conversation that we would start to have. It's like, I'm here, I joined Amazon not because I was already being abused by Amazon, right? I submitted myself to the Amazon employee abusive relationship because I knew that that relationship was that way, and I wanted to be with the people and be one of them standing up and changing it. And when people start speaking, and when people start speaking to each other about those issues, then that, one of the colleagues in the Amazon Labor Union put this really well. He said, the I, which Amazon always tries to talk to employees as individuals. What's your individual self-interest? And just think about how are you going to do the best? When we turn the I into the we, that becomes a problem for management because that becomes a power. Now it's not these isolated people that can be, discarded so easily. Now the people know each other, they're associated with each other, and they can have this power together. And they know each other's stories, and they know each other's problems, and they know the ways that they're trying to help each other. And so even when, Amazon or any employer, does do the thing, they do retaliate, and that happened to both myself and Alicia. The issue, probably the most famous thing about me as an Amazon organizer is that I was a fired Amazon organizer. It happened right after the second election campaign. Even though they fired us, because we had a relationship, to a wider thing that wasn't just us versus Amazon, we could get mutual support. We could support each other. We could coordinate with each other, and we keep doing the work. And so both of us are here. We're still doing the work. We're still speaking these stories because first we came together and listened to each other and found out what our common ground was and what our common problems were and sort of what our common mission was. And so that is to me, that's the power of the story, is not just how can I solve my problem, but how can we realize our problems really are all connected and all interrelated, and we need to think about everybody else's stories and problems together. I'll stop there for now.
And
Hello. Raise your hand if you have student loan debt. How much do you have? It's a lot. So as I said, my name is Melissa. 12 years ago, I was working trying to stop the right-wingers from cutting Social Security benefits. And my boss asked me to go with him to a meeting at 8 in the morning at the AFL-CIO to hear from someone who's talking about a different organizing campaign and something that was happening. And this person started the meeting out by asking people around the table to raise their hand if they had student loan debt. So at this time, 12 years ago, I was still the youngest person around the table. And I was the only one that raised my hand for having student loan debt. And then this person goes, well, how much debt do you have? And I sat there deer in the headlights because my boss was sitting next to me, all these other people. No one else had student loan debt. And I was asked how much I had. And I just replied, I'm not telling. And then this guy goes, well, as long as you're ashamed of your debt, the banks have all the power. And that was the first time in my life I was told it wasn't my fault that I had debt. And then he asked me again, and I said half the amount of my debt because, let's be real, shame is really hard to overcome. And shame is the tool that the people in power use to make it really hard for us to fight back. So I said half the amount, and I knew on the spot that what I wanted to do with my life was to get rid of student loan debt and make college free. The person who put me on the spot in front of my boss was none other than the Reverend Jesse Jackson. You might have heard of him. He's a really good organizer. So that's where my journey to fighting back on student debt began. It began when I was working to protect Social Security benefits and then got called out at a work meeting by Reverend Jesse Jackson. So the continuity of organizing across the generations is really something to behold. And so I have student loan debt because our government decided to punish people whose parents couldn't write a check for their education. And that having a paywall for higher education is a way to protect the children of the wealthy. So they have access to education that other people have to make a choice between who in the family is going to take on debt, because student debt is not just the students. It's parent plus loans, it's graduate loans, it's student loans. And when we say get rid of student loan debt, we mean all of it for everybody. So my story, and talking to people, I learned that a lot of my peers were like 12 years ago, were afraid to raise their hand if they have student loan debt. We're afraid to talk about it because shame is shame is a tool that, as I said, they use. And so me being someone in the organizing space, starting to be very vocal about student loan debt and like bugging everybody really helped to get a lot of this started and going. And so I would explain about how one time when a student loan bill hit, before a paycheck hit, I had no money to put gas in my car, and I was literally on a campaign at a gas station with my trunk, like crawling through my trunk to see what quarters I had buried places to be able to put gas in the tank for the rest of the day until my next paycheck came in a few days. And all of those little indignities that come with it, explaining how when I was in college, peers were like, ew, you have student loan debt. Or you hear from people who say, oh yeah, I tell my kids don't marry anybody with student loan debt. Oh. So those are just this is what happens, and that's how all of this works. And so by me starting to talk about it with people, I made it easier for other folks to see that this is real. And then other people start talking about it. Now you have people who run for office and talk about having student loan debt. They talk about being defaulted. They talk about having their wages garnished. And then we tie it all back into this is a structural problem. And yes, we need to make college free, but right now we have a path because of executive action that the president can take all on his own to get rid of the student loan debt through picking up his pen, ideally by August 31st. No deadline, no pressure at all right now. But we've gotten other people to tell their stories. But we also know that if you've experienced harm and if you've experienced pain, you don't have to share your pain if that's something you don't want to do. So we also have spaces in the work that I do on student loan debt where you just need to show up. If you don't want to explain how much it's hurt you, that's okay too, because no one should it's just about showing up and doing the work. So some people are comfortable sharing their story, and that's great. Other people don't want to share their story, but they will show up and do the work, and that's great too, because it's really important that all of this work is done in a way where the people who are impacted are the leaders of this work in a way that they feel empowered, that we feel empowered. And it's been really powerful doing that work. So I started from being completely ashamed of my debt to getting called out by Reverend Jesse Jackson to 12 years later, we are on the cusp of we might get a win really soon. So, and if folks see me later, I have those signs for you to take a selfie with and tweet, because we want tons of messaging coming out of this weekend to cancel all the student loan debt. Over to you, Laura. And Laura, thank you for including me on this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, again. My name is Alicia Johnson. I work for Amazon for 6 months. 6 months. 7 months. Okay. And I just started work there last year, November. But when I get hired, they told us that the union was coming in. So I was happy because a company like Amazon needs unionize, and workers should be secure, get job security. Okay, so I was with that when they came in at the orientation and tell us the union is coming in, so this job will be unionized. I said, okay, well, fine. It happened that they come in, they started coming in by voting. So employees, I work in the L field, I'm a 1199 worker, so I know the benefit that the union gave all employees. So I encourage my fellow employers, fellow workers I encouraged them to vote for the union, which they didn't want to vote for the union because most of them was working already without a union, and it was like 6 and 9 months they were working without a union. So I said, you guys need a union. It's all about job security and your benefit. So we need to vote for the union. They say, oh, Alicia, we've been here for 9 months. Some say 6 months, and we don't think we need the union. We're doing fine without the union. I said, no, you all not doing fine. Right now, you're not getting paid vacation time. You're not getting paid holiday time. You're not getting sick time. You're not getting personal time. You got to work very hard for that. And it's not right for we to come here and stand on our leg for 12 hours, 3 days a week, and not getting nothing more than just what they want to give us. So I said, no, we needs better than that. So we're going to vote for the union. So they says to me, okay, Alicia, tell me what's the benefit that's the union give. I said, the union give you vacation with paid, time off, personal time, and when they hire you, any union job, when you had hired, after 90 days, you get all your benefit kick in. They said, yes, really? I said, yes, I'm telling you, because I am 1199. I'm a member from 1199. From a union member, I'm telling you that's what they gave. So they were like, oh, let's see. So we should vote for the union. And I encourage all my co-workers, we're going to go to the ballot, and we're going to vote yes. While Amazon was telling us, no, we're not going to vote for the union. You're going to tell the union we don't need them. We're going to make a deal with you guys. I said, no, don't let them brainwash you. It's all about manipulation. Don't. They're going to manipulate you guys to control after you guys said no. So now I'm telling you, if you all don't vote for the union, I'll be sorry for you all, because they're going to have control over you all. So I says, okay, they says, I got other union members, which told them, like I bumped into a coworker, a friend from MTA, and I said, can you tell my coworkers what benefit a union job gave? And they said, yes, you better off vote for the union. It's all about job security. So they were like, okay, so we spread the word all over Amazon KFJ8. And I go around and I make sure, tell everyone, we need to vote for the union, because this is what we need and this is what we're going to get. And if we don't do this, our ass going to eat grass. And I'm not eating it with you all. So we're going to vote yes. So now, when the time comes for the vote, everyone was like looking at me. I said, no, we're going to the ballot, and we're going to vote yes. So then we put I-5. I said, yeah. And we went. So I was with some of them. We went to the ballot. We vote yes. Some girls was like behind me and said, oh, Alicia, we're going to put on the ballot. We need the union. I said, whether you want to write it on the paperwork or not, our voice going to hear it tonight. And we're going to make history in this Amazon at Staten Island, which we did make history. But they trying to overturn the election. That's the first Amazon in the United States, cross the border, that make history, which now Jeff is fighting to overturn the election from giving us as a workers our benefit, our desire, from giving us a unionized job. Isn't that something? So I promise my fellow co-workers that I will fight to the end. If it even take me my life, I'm going to do that. And we're going to fight for you guys. Even though they terminate me after telling the employees them after the election and won the election, they terminate me and said, oh, I don't meet the production. I said, oh, yes? They terminate me, they fire me after election. Said I don't meet their quality production standard. And I was like, you are a liar. And that's not fair. But that's okay. We're going to fight you to the end. And we're going to fight for what we deserve. And I'm fighting for my employees, my co-workers, my fellow workers behind me that I leave behind now. I'm fighting for their right and their benefit. They deserve a better fare with job security, with benefit, not working like a slave and nothing in return. And we thank you to listen to me tonight.
And my story, 5 years ago, I walked into a doctor's office with a nagging cough, and I walked out with a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. I'm still alive thanks to the health care I received. I'm in remission today. Too many people are not here today because they could not get the health care that they needed. While I was going through chemotherapy, Republicans in the US House were voting to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. The day after my first chemotherapy appointment, while I was on the couch going through the symptoms the day after, that's when Republicans in the US House voted to dismantle Obamacare, and then they held a great big party about it. So I was activated by this. I did a lot of events in Nevada where I lived, and I already had a background in communications, and I had relationships that many people don't necessarily start out with. So I was fortunate in that I had some of the tools I needed to push back. So it was a moment in which activists all over the country stood up and shared their healthcare stories. Some people, their stories spread further, and I think some of that was luck, some of that was where they were situated, in what circumstances they told their story. But one of the things I wanted to do while I was going through this and afterwards was provide activists the tools they needed to share their stories. So I founded a nonprofit, Healthcare Voices, and we offer free media trainings online. We offer support like that for anybody, regardless of your issue, whether it's healthcare or not, so that you can get the trainings and tools you need to be effective on whatever you're fighting about. So that's one of the ways that I used my story on healthcare reform. We beat back the attacks on healthcare in 2017, and now, just the other day, President Biden signed into law some expansions of healthcare that may not be everything that we wanted, but we are making progress. And that is due to the power of personal stories. That the Affordable Care Act was not so popular after it passed because there was so much demonization and not so much the stories of people that benefited from it. And I think that it's critical for all of our issues that we make sure to lift up the people that are directly benefiting or suffering from whatever's going on, because it's a lot harder to demonize a real human being than some imaginary person that they've made up. And I'm sure for the Amazon fights, they probably demonized union organizers, which is you, their coworker. And so that's why it's so critical for everyone to be able to keep telling your story and make sure that what's in people's minds is not this imaginary idea, but the real people of me and Alicia and Matt and Melissa. And all of you. So those are our personal stories, but really we wanted to hear from you and how we can help you do what you're working on. So if you have thoughts or questions, we don't have a really great roving mic setup, but if you have questions, we want to help you with our experiences.
There is a mic hanging out in the back there. The fifth one that was on the table before?
Yeah, there is the mic that was on the table, so maybe we can work with that.
Was she not hearing
you? Yes, so please, we have a question.
Hi, this is a question for Alicia.
Yes.
Have you considered litigation for wrongful termination against Jeff Bezos?
Yes, I am.
Good for you.
Thank
Wonderful.
you. I'm fighting.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I will achieve it. I'm not giving up, no.
And also, we take comments. If there's something you're working on with storytelling that everyone in this room should know about, this is your chance to share it.
So we both filed unfair labor practice charges with the National Labor Relations Board, which is, it's not the best guarantor of rights or anything. The remedies for workers, even if they find in our favor, are weak, at best. The likelihood that they even find in the favor of workers is low, actually. But it is part of the struggle, it is part of the fight, and there is a sort of an appeal process there. And we have reached out to some wonderful people at Cornell Law School, the Labor Law Clinic there. Angela Cornell, I don't know if any relation with the school founder, but Angela Cornell at Cornell Law helped us. She had some amazing law students who have been working on that. And part of what they've been doing is sort of crafting the story. I filed mine separately, individually, but with Alicia, there was a lot of discussion with the two law students and Alicia, the entire narrative of the story, what exactly happened, all the details, so that it could be as compelling as possible. Not just for that, not just for the unfair labor practice charge, but moving forward with everything else, because obviously, the movement, the campaign has multiple fronts to it. So, if we only focus on the National Labor Relations Board, that's a very weak strategy. Or if we only focus on the media or something, it can be a very superficial strategy. But each piece can be very important when they're all connected together in sort of a strategy where one thing is building into another thing. Sorry. So that's-
Question over there.
Thanks, Kylie.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Sasha, and I work at an affordable housing nonprofit in the East Bay, California. And part of one of the tasks that our organizing team does is they host a training session for residents of affordable housing, which is I don't know if it's the same definition outside of California, but this is subsidized nonprofit housing. Who want to get involved in organizing and want to develop their skills. And so I'm tasked with doing a training on how to teach them how to tell their story in a compelling way. And I would love to get your input on what are some of the essentials that you would recommend including in that talk.
Okay. Great.
We can start from Melissa and go down.
Hey, Sasha. I'm Sashanti that I saw you. So I think for me, one of the things that's essential for the storytelling is that it's always in their voice, in the person who's telling its voice. We don't need a manufactured, here's what a comms person would write out voice. So helping them to figure out, these are the 3 key points that it's really impacting me, and always be in their voice. Because nothing beats authentic. And authentic is the key part that makes a connection. So going back to that and making sure people know that stories aren't a competition. It's not about having something that like a Hollywood movie kind of story. Your story is enough. What you've experienced is enough, and it's important to be heard. So helping them to have that confidence as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess be clear on what the problem is. Why is that important, significant to the person, and what is their plan or vision of how that could be different? And then the thing I would add to that is, because this is about personal storytelling, but storytelling, you're always telling it to somebody, right? So you always have to think about the other person as well. So how the final part is how does that connect to the person that you're speaking to? Why would this be important to them? And what's their vision of change look like? And how do those two things connect? And that should be the last part, I feel, of your personal story should be who you're talking to. what's your, I mean, I don't know, what's your ask, but like, or call to action if you want to get like, wonky about it. But like, what next steps are they going to take as a result of having that conversation?
Okay, the reason why I'm telling my story is because I want to change things in the job market with jobs that, private jobs then, to be unionized. Because it's good to be secure employees, benefit, and all of that, et cetera. So we don't need to be keeping it to ourselves. It's just open up to the world and they know what we workers is going through without a union and with a union. You understand? So this is why we are telling this story.
I think people are coming from different places. Some of your attendees may be very self-motivated, and what they need from you is more connections. So if reporters come to you, then you would just send them on to the people with stories. Some folks may have never told their story before, and they need help, crafting it smoothly, getting it down to a tight 2 minutes or whatever. So I would just be aware that people have different levels of experience and different needs. And if you have the capacity, talk to everybody and find out what they need.
Sure.
More questions?
Hi there, my name is Kaylee Hyde from Climate Power, and we love to share the stories on our platforms of people who have been personally impacted by the climate crisis in a variety of ways, as we all are. And one conversation that we have regularly is on uplifting those stories and sharing those stories, but not having it be a transactional experience. So I'd just love to hear from your side of it, what makes you feel good when people uplift your stories, I guess.
Well, I told my story because I was very motivated for change. I lived in a state in which I had a senator whose vote was up for grabs on the issue that was keeping me alive. So I was extremely motivated to push him on that vote and then hold him accountable when he voted against it. But for climate crisis, there are direct votes, I suppose. But perhaps it's more the motivation of people wanting to tell their story about how it's affecting them directly and how we need to do something. So I guess maybe figure out what is motivating people, and then that will lead you to what direction you should do with their story. But I have gone to some trainings, or I've been in rooms where people felt guilty about asking volunteers to share their story. And I think if someone is motivated, like we're all very motivated to tell our story for change. And so you shouldn't need to feel guilty if you ask us to speak out, because we want to speak out. So I would, give us as many opportunities as possible to tell our story, because we want to do something with that
We
story.
want to change things. Yeah.
Oh, there's someone over.
Well, did anybody else want to answer that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, things I said before go back to the why are they talking to you, or why are you talking to them? Like, why is it significant to them, personally? Obviously, the climate crisis is a problem for all of us existentially, and each of us individually in different ways. But each person has to the point about people might be in different places. So people their motivation might be more self-motivated in terms of like the problem was a personal problem, or someone might have a personal problem, but the thing that's really motivating them is like the larger movement or something. And so that next step I was talking about, like what is their vision of change, or what do they expect to see happen? That's connected to the why is it meaningful? Because if I'm just talking and nothing's going to change, there might be some catharsis, but it might not be that meaningful. But if I do think that my talking might lead to something, then that'll be extra meaningful that I'm talking, and I'll be grateful that you're giving me that opportunity, because it's adding meaning to my life. So getting to that, like, what is their vision of of change? What is your vision of change? And where do those two things line up? And how can your conversation and your work together be in common ground? And so it's not transactional. You guys are side by side, advancing on the same level.
Hello. Thank you all for sharing your stories. So my name is Janae Bates with Isaiah and Faith in Minnesota, and I have been running a series of deep dive storytelling trainings with incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people. And there's definitely a lot of like good things that I've learned out of doing these trainings and that I've gotten feedback from them on. But the question for you that's related and kind of connected to what you've been talking about, when you're telling these like really powerful stories, but that are also like grounded in pain, and you are having to consider your like pain to power trajectory, there often is some, especially when you're sharing stories, it could turn into pity porn if you're not careful, which leaves the storyteller with like a vulnerability hangover. So what are things that you, as people who tell your story a lot, what are the things that encourage you in the midst of vulnerability hangover that, you know, that helps you to be able to go out and do it again and again with power?
Okay.
So I think like for one thing is I try to minimize people getting more vulnerable than they want to be. Because I think, so I led a lot of the work in DC do you guys remember the whole Kavanaugh fiasco of his confirmation and us having to go through that? And that required a lot of people who came forward to share their stories of sexual assault. And it was people constantly in the Capitol asking telling their story to any senator that walked by. So we ended up bringing in therapists and having like a safe space, because it was a lot. And one of my takeaways from being a part of a community that did that is that people should never feel pressured to be to be super vulnerable. They should be able to tell their story in a way that doesn't hurt their mental health or doesn't get them to a place of despair, because all of this work should be uplifting and empowering. So that's something that I reinforce all the time in the work, and that that's when I said that there shouldn't be like a competition on stories or just getting it to everything to a point where we're doing the organizing work because we're building power together, and help people to ensure that you never have to go into that point. So we don't have hangovers from this. And that I think to also tie into not being transactional is that everything should be authentic. So don't ask for stories if you don't need them. Don't ask people to share if it's just gonna be part of the collection, but not actually put to use. So that way everything is done from a point of view and a relationship to really build community together.
Anybody else want to?
Yeah, I mean, well, the first word after the article here is in this panel is power, and so I think if you focus on the power of the personal storytelling, what is it like? Again, like the vision of change. What is it that telling a story is going to possibly do? You know, it doesn't have to like change laws or change the world in some broad way, but it can change the person telling the story also in a small way, and that can be significant for that person, enough that they feel more empowered after telling it, even if it's a story of pain and disempowerment. I think also, I mean, especially for the work that we do, you know, a lot of the stories that we would tell, again, are stories that lots of people have. And so bridging that, you know, somewhat generalizing your own particular story and realizing that you alone don't carry this burden, that you alone are not the only person who's ever dealt with this issue, that this isn't, you know, you've been singled out, you know, by, you know, the gods for, you know, special punishment, but that these are broad issues that are that are affecting lots of people. And so that speaking your problem it can help you, and that's important, and you get to think about how, but then also can help other people, and that's important, maybe even more important, you know, possibly to that person, and you can think about how to do that. And if your focus is there, like, what is this going to do to empower myself or empower other people, then even if the story itself is one that's painful, you know, that, you know, it doesn't necessarily have a happy ending or redemption at all. It can still be, telling the story can still be powerful for the person, right? Like you know, the biggest part of my story is I was fired after the organizing campaign of these two, you know, and then I had to go on, you know, and talk to a bunch of reporters about getting fired. But I got, you know, and, you know, invited on to Democracy Now!, and I said, it can't just be me, because I'm not the only one who got fired. So if you're going to invite me on, you have to also invite my colleague who had just gotten fired a couple of days later, Tristan Lyon, onto the show, and it has to be both of us, because we have sort of different stories, but they're part of a broader story. It's important to see the different perspectives, but there's also a lot of people who will see their story in what happened to me, and there's a lot of people who will see their story in what happened to Tristan. And having those two different stories makes it not about either one of us saying, woe is me. It's about both of us together collaborating, saying, these are problems. We face these problems. Speaking to these problems gives you all more information, gives you more power to deal with these issues. It gives us more power by speaking, because we can also turn that into an opportunity to speak to the issues, right? The issue is not just that I lost my job. The issue is that these workplace policies and structures are totally unjust, right? And it's beyond just me,
Unjust.
right? And so I speak my story. My story is other people's stories too.
True.
I've heard the exact same story about what happened to me. I've heard the exact same story about what happened to Alicia. The exact same story. I mean, what happened to Tristan was pretty much the same thing on the same day. Earlier in the same day that Alicia got fired, Tristan
Same
got
month.
fired.
Yes, and there's a lot more behind it.
And
Get
the
fired.
wild thing was I didn't even know Alicia
Yes.
when she got fired. I only knew about her after, and it was as a result of the Democracy Now! Thing. I said, oh, it's got to be me and Tristan at least. And then Casio Mendoza, one of the organizers in the ALU, said, oh, there's these 3 other workers who also got fired. We should be focusing on their stories, not your story, because you're an organizer, and it looks like the ALU just cares about ALU organizers if we're just focusing on yours. And I thought, well, yes, I totally agree. I've not met these people before, and I didn't know about their stories, but now that I do, I'm super excited to connect with them and help them support themselves, support each other, tell their stories. And so that's when I asked him for Alicia's contact information, got in touch with Alicia as soon as possible to talk about unfair labor practice charges, to talk about does she want to speak to reporters? Do we need to do fundraising to make sure she doesn't get evicted and lose her possessions and all of those sorts of stuff. And it happened because I learned her story, right? And then I was able to reach out because our story is also connected in that way. And so it became, even though each one of our cases was
Are
like
different.
painful, it was an injustice, it also brought us together in this way that did create some power.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cheryl Steinberg. I am the Political and Advocacy Director of Mi Familia Vota in Arizona. And I just want to start off what I'm about to say, that leads into a question / wanting your advice for some idea I have, that we are always on native land. This is native land. We're always on native land. Next point is Latinos. A lot of us are native. And living in Arizona, there are a lot of native nations still. And there's a border that was made up like a lot of other colonized countries and continents have experienced. So there are 11 million undocumented Latinos in the United States, and that is not by mistake. Why? Because there is great benefit from exploiting people that can never really come out of the shadows to stand up for themselves.
True.
So that's the next point. So, all right, so this is the idea that I have, but I'm kind of confused as to how to go about it. Why? Because undocumented Latinos fear for their lives every day. You will never hear the stories of police brutality because you will never hear really about those kids that have those thousands of kids. A lot of them have been picked up by human traffickers. You will never hear the sexual abuses, the missing body parts. You will never hear these stories. It will never make it to the news. And we live on a continent where genocide is the foundation. Genocide and enslavement of peoples, right? So my idea is, okay, I am Ecuadorian Jewish American, to explain my name. And I have experienced a lot of stuff as a result of what people see when they see my race, right? But I have the privilege of saying, no, I'm a US citizen. No, I speak English perfectly. No, I have a master's degree. I got to go to international schools growing up, you know? But when people see my race, right, sometimes they just block me from things or they talk to me a certain way. There's a lot of aggression.
True.
Shut up.
Yeah, go to
Nobody
it.
cares.
True.
You know? When I went to college in a place that had Native American people living, like I was one of the only not white or black people at my whole university, you know? So the question I have is, so I have this idea where I want to find a way to have people who are scared for their lives to ever share their story because of how intense the policies are, how intense the policing is, how it doesn't matter, like there was the SB 1070, you know, where they were like, oh, you look undocumented. No, I look native. I actually look from these continents and you're getting rid of me. You're taking my life away from me, my kids away from me. You're giving them, you know. So how do you create this sort of maybe anonymous where they feel safe to speak, but their whole entire lives are not threatened by speaking out? And I'm not just talking about their income. I'm not just talking about their family. I'm talking about their lives, like their heart beating afterwards. How do you create a safe way for people who are at the mercy of everyone around them, are so easily exploited, so vulnerable, who don't have documents. They can't even report if anything happens to them. How do you create a safe way for them for people in that situation to share their stories, to feel heard? Because unless you know people like that, I'm sure you're not really hearing the stories. Unless that's a part of your community, I'm sure you're not hearing the stories. And I know that Latinos are not the only undocumented people in this country or in the world, right? We hear about migrants from Africa going to, you know, asylum seekers being treated like nothing, being treated worse than flies, right? So I was wondering for you guys' advice, like, how can I start this? What things should I keep in mind? Because like, it's incredibly vulnerable, right? But I want these stories to get out because that's how you mobilize. That's how you change people's attitudes, you know? To criminalize people who, first of all, a lot of the people that are coming undocumented are at the bottom of society in Latin America, are indigenous as well. You know, in Latin America, whatever. And it just gets worse sometimes because they're just trying to survive, you know? So, yeah, what advice do you guys have?
So I believe an organization called Al Otro Lado, which is a law group that is based in Southern California on the border. They actually have experience in being able to share these stories anonymously because there's a detention center. I believe, I forget the name of the detention center because there's two that I switch the names up sometimes, where they were able to take the stories of the people that were being held in a privately owned ICE facility and were able to share their stories anonymously. So there are groups that are doing this work. So I would look up Al Otro Lado. The ACLU also has experience with being able to share stories anonymously. But I think one thing you have to be honest, if someone has risk, there's always risk. So we can never, ever guarantee anybody 100% safety. And so I think that's something to also be really cognizant of. But there are groups that I would look up the groups that are doing a lot of the work on the border because they have been sharing stories anonymously, and they might be able to provide advice for how to scale that up.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that, but just to be careful, because if people are putting themselves at risk with sharing their story, you don't want to put anybody at additional risk. And same thing if you're working on abortion issues in states where it has become criminalized, where Facebook has turned over private messages and somebody is in jail, I believe, because of it. So just social media, emails, all of these things leave trails. And I would talk to the people that are better experts than us on how to protect yourself and the people with stories.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked with a sanctuary group in New York for a while, and I think there are a lot of these different kinds of groups that do immigrant defense so that people are facing deportation. Have someone who's a legal aid lawyer who can help them with the documentation, people who are trying to file for asylum, And a lot of that is actually, a lot of that process is telling a story. I mean, it's telling a story in a certain kind of bureaucratic way, but they write it down. They get the whole thing, and then you might look. The organization I was volunteering with didn't have there wasn't like a strong way in which they were trying to leverage those stories to the public. They weren't trying to popularize them or bring them to the media, but if people were comfortable with that, and if those groups might be a good place to do that because you have the people who know how to protect them and they're working on protecting them in those situations, and so it became a real sensitive way in which you could publicize those stories by working through organizations that already have like an underpinning of legal support for those people, as a suggestion.
Hello, my name is April Lewis, and I am a housing justice organizer from Charlotte, North Carolina. One of our challenges as we work to shift the narrative for what everyone assumes housing is and what the issues are, some of the issues that we are arising is when we do have tenants that will share their story, some of the information they omit or don't share definitely changes the whole perspective of what the issue is, and it actually can affect other issues. Then we have, of course, the dynamic of this is their personal lives. Normally we're at their home, inside their home. And it's like, how do we basically make a space for them to feel more comfortable, definitely to share. We do get them to share their stories, but it's just, we have to work so hard to change a negative narrative that is definitely not true and is surrounded by misinformation and disinformation. So it's just like, what key points or questions or things that we can do to make sure that the main points and what we're trying to change in the narrative is always addressed in the stories. And then how do we also keep that tenant on topic and not drift off in a rant about things that really are not going to help the case? It just hurts it. So some of those are some of the challenges that we got right now.
I'm just curious, a question, what are the sorts of things that that workers or that your tenants tend to leave out of the story that you're saying was important?
So in some dynamics, when you think when you think of this situation, so we deal with apartment complexes, we deal with single-family homes, we deal with mobile homes, we deal with private landlords. Normally, we have more issues with private landlords because there's conversations that happen that affect the whole outcome of their case, their eviction, or whatever. And if it's omitted, even though it might be personal, it definitely makes a negative change in what we're pushing, and it makes the tenants look like, oh, they're hiding something, and nobody thinks that this is their personal information, this is their home. Their kids, if we put them on the news, their kids are gonna know, I'm about to be evicted. That's a different thought pattern. That's something that they have to carry on. And then we also have to be mindful of retaliation. So sometimes they won't tell us the conversations, or they don't want to put out that they're being harassed by landlords, and they won't tell us that information, or they won't share it because they don't want the retaliation to get worse. And it's real because it'll trickle down to an eviction. And we can't protect them from eviction. We just have to do things after to get them back in. So it's like painting or making a space for them to understand that, yes, there might be issues that's going to arise. However, pushing forward, we will have a resolution, but it's just how do we make them comfortable? And the best way to explain, to give us what it is, put out what you're comfortable with, but the information that they're not comfortable with is the one that really makes the case. So it's just making space for them to be able to tell their story authentically, clearly, concisely, and stay on task to the mission that we're on.
So I think one thing with that is if there's information that you definitely need, is you could have a question list to be like, hey, we're gonna have a conversation about this, start talking about it. These are the questions that are really important for us to know about, to have that be a prompt. And then conversely, you can have a list of like, if as you're talking, you start veering into this, always come back to this, kind of like help and practice that, but not practice it too much so it doesn't come off as like a rehearse. So you want that sweet spot of like, being able to like have a conversation about it, but not sound rehearsed. But I think a guide questions for like the prompts for like, oh, are you being harassed? And sometimes people, what I found in dealing in a situation is that I could tell someone was being harassed, but they weren't using that word. So then I just asked them, would you use this word to describe as what's happening to you? And then they're like, oh, yeah, I didn't think I met that quality because it wasn't as bad as what happened to somebody else. So then that's able to lead into a conversation like, no, this is really bad. And you're able to label it. If you feel that's what's happening to you, you can label that as harassment.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. If they're like very specific things that you really need them to tell you if they're happening, you can ask about those things specifically. Is this thing happening? You know, and they might not otherwise volunteer that information, but if you put them on the spot with the question, they'll probably give you the answer if they trust you that you're there to help them. And that should obviously be step one, is you should already have that trust to a certain extent. And if they're leaving information out because they're afraid of something, I mean, that's the issue you have to get to, right? Is how valid is that fear? How much can you assuage that the valid context that's making that fear? Or if the fear is, you know, overblown or something, how much can you assuage the fear itself? Because you don't actually have to deal with the context that's causing it. But if there's a valid fear that something's going to happen and you can't actually fix that, like, well, I mean, that is going to be a big hurdle to overcome, because, I mean, they might be totally reasonable to be leaving out certain information.
And you can also model the conversation and have someone making it really hard to talk about it, so people can see this conversation modeled. So then when they're talking about it, they know how the pattern should go. Alicia, do you have?
It is time for our last question.
Hi, I'm Shonda Williams from Vermont, SD Communications. And I was just thinking, this question's for Matt. Do you ever feel like people are negating your story because they just see you as another privileged white male?
Wow. Put me on the spot with the last question. Well, if I'm honest, yes. I would say yes, that's definitely been a situation, specifically in the ALU campaign. You know, I came in as, you know, what's called a SALT, although I think that term, you know, is a little bit misleading. You know, it came out of a union organizing strategy where organized unions would send staff people to organize places. You know, I took the job because I also needed a job. You know, I took it as a part-time job, and I took another part-time job that was largely the same thing. You know, same orange vest, same gloves. I was moving stuff around a warehouse, but it wasn't Amazon. It was a running races company, and it wasn't like a horrible management philosophy. It was like pretty relaxed. But, you know, people saw me, oh, you chose to be at Amazon. You chose to be at Amazon to organize, so you're not a real worker. I mean, this was a story that got told by leadership of ALU. And even after, you know, after I was fired, I mean, part of the reason why there wasn't much ALU support around, I mean, you know, Kasia wanted other people's stories to be told, but he also did not want my story to be told because he didn't think my story was a very good reflection of the ALU as a whole. Even though, you know, half of the ALU organizers are people who joined to organize at Amazon, and I think that's an essential part of the strategic success, and other Amazon warehouses will need that sort of organized dedication to succeed in the long run of a campaign as well. And I think the story of you know, there's so many different ways that people can be wedged, you know, and divided against each other. You know, and that's done by the bosses, you know, that's done by the management, that's done by politicians, you know, that's done by, you know, everyone is trying to divide and conquer, you know, the people that they're, you know, trying to, you know, have power over, you know, and our job is to bridge those divides, you know, and the way we bridge those divides is not by denying that they exist, right? So like my identity is my identity. I do come from a middle class background, you know, I did go to college, you know, I am white and privileged in a lot of ways that, you know, other people are not, you know, and I don't deny that, but I also have a lot of common ground. I am a worker, you know, I am of the working class. I do have college debt that I can't pay off. You know, I do work for practically minimum wage. You know, I have a college degree that I don't put to use. You know, I have a degree in math and philosophy. You know, I would have been a math teacher right now, but I'm organizing instead. But I'm struggling and scraping by too. So when people have those stories, like that's my story too. Even though my background is different, and that's not to say, oh, I'm just, that's not to deny privilege, but that's to say, the job is to find common ground and to build out from there. And like especially for organizing, that's the beauty of it. In fact, the ALU, just the small organizing committee of the ALU, has anarchists, it has communists, it has socialists, it has Democrats, it has Trump voters in it, all doing this radical thing, and not even really talking about the politics, partisan politics, because that's not relevant to what we're doing. There are sort of outside ways in which it is, but what's most relevant is like we all have certain interests in common. We all have a certain common enemy. We have common problems we're trying to solve, and a common path to solving it. And that common path to solving it demands that we come together and move beyond some of those differences. But it also demands that we acknowledge differences, and not just acknowledge them, but like leverage them. Because different people's perspectives, different people's backgrounds, different people's experiences bring different things to the table, and all of that stuff is valid. All of that stuff is valuable. All of that stuff can be used. People have different connections. They can bring in different people. They have different communities. All of that stuff was essential for us to win an election. I didn't even know Alicia, but Alicia was talking to workers. She was an organic leader in the ALU. She wasn't going to organizing committee meetings, but she was on the bus 2.5 hours a day each way, talking to workers. She was on the job talking to workers. She has experience that I don't have as a unionized healthcare worker. So she can speak directly to that, in a non-theoretical way about why a union is good, just straight up her experience. So each person's identity is important. And I do think it will always happen, that you'll have these divides, these identity divides. And the reactionary response is dismiss it as just being, we're all the same or whatever, and that's not a good solution. We aren't all the same. We are all different, and that difference is powerful and enormously useful and should be celebrated. And so that's where I kind of go with it. I have a middle-class background. Yeah, I'm white. Those things we can leverage too. Those aren't necessarily. I'm not going to try to dominate the room all the time. I mean, I am with a microphone at a table talking, but usually I'm not.
Well, thank you, everybody, and take a T-shirt and enjoy Netroots.